Hello, welcome to Post-Colonial Space. I'm Masood Raja, and today I'll briefly like to build up on something that I had discussed in a recent talk that I gave for a conference at Rifa International University, Lahore. And my topic there was about dislodging the colonial linguistic legacies, and you can watch the whole webinar. It's available on the channel. But there was one really interesting question there, which I tried to answer, but I don't think so. My answer was convincing enough. And the question was about change, because that's what I was proposing. And the question was, how can we do that individually? Because the problems are systemic. And that, I think, is a really important question whenever we think of societal change or political change, because we are up against these implacable systems. And one reason we feel so powerless usually is because we are thinking in terms of the system and imagining ourselves to be individuals, right? And the way these systems of power work is by isolating us, right? By sundering our relationships with others, by telling us we are individuals in our own right and alone and must fight alone, by mythologizing that kind of individualism. And so my response to that was that we know that the systems that we are up against are powerful. But that doesn't mean we should wait for the system to change, but because the systems don't change by themselves unless there is pressure on them. So, as individuals, as scholars, there are various things we can do. One is, of course, as individual scholars within the system, we constantly keep pricking it, right? We constantly keep writing, keep speaking, because a system can normalize itself only when there is no pressure on it, when nothing is pricking it or challenging its assumptions. So we do that as individuals. But then we are then at the mercy of the system because it will try to destroy us. So that is where solidarities come in. That is where we reach out to our colleagues, we reach out to our students, we reach out to people outside of the academy, activists, right? People who are fighting in the trenches, and we build solidarities, right? We build regional solidarities, we build larger solidarities. And when we build solidarities, what ends up happening is you become a constituency. It's harder to silence you, it's harder to erase you. But when you become a constituency, you have more power because you become a collective. And this model of resistance, of course, I mean, if you read Deleuze, you'll already understand it, because what I'm talking about is this kind of rhizomatic resistance. If you imagine power and systems as this web, we cannot assault the system at a single point, right? We have to tackle it wherever we are at different nodes, right? And then we have to create those nodes. How do we create them? By talking to others, by learning from each other, by standing in solidarity with others, right? By joining the public marches, right? A lot of time people ask me, what's the point on going to this march? It doesn't change anything. But the point is that you're putting your body out there in solidarity with others. And that is a challenge to the system. If more people do that, the system will have to renegotiate, in that Gramscian sense, its mechanism, right? It will have to incorporate this new pressure, this new knowledge in it. So the systemic change then will come through collectivities, through solidarities, by accepting others, by being more tolerant of differences, but focused on the questions of rights, questions of justice, questions of equality. We'll also have to train ourselves to not become oppressive ourselves as a group, not to become, not to embody the same practices of the system that we are trying to replace. And that's where, of course, a careful reading of Freire would be very useful to all of us. Because not only does Freire teach us about a pedagogy, a revolutionary critical pedagogy, what he's also teaching is about revolutionary movements, how to bring about change in a way that we actually change the system that creates the oppression, and how not to become the oppressor ourselves, right? And we can only do that if we dislodge the writ of an oppressive system from our own souls. So, for example, let's say you're in Pakistan and you are a man in a university. You already have a sort of a privileged location, privileged subjectivity. What would be a revolutionary act on your part? Not to become a men's rights movement guy, but to work in solidarity with women, right? Because they're the ones fighting for their rights, fighting for equality. So if you do that, then you have entered this space of the other, offered your support, and in the process have become part of change. You could do that by becoming part of a constituency, and as an individual, you could do that by critically thinking about your own behavior. How do you treat women? How do you think of them, right? Because reshaping that would also make an individual impact. But if we get 10 million of these men in Pakistan or here in America, we could change the system, right? Into a more just system, just in terms of this gender binary. But solidarities are important. And I experienced it a few years ago. Wherever I work, I was running into problems. My views were, being dismissed and not taken seriously. And I thought I was contributing positively to the debates. But it's easier to isolate a single individual, right? You can label them and put them aside. But when I started talking to my other colleagues, right, my other BIPOC faculty colleagues, and when we started talking about the issues together, we became a constituency. When we became a constituency, that meant we could work in solidarity, that not a single one of could be isolated or bought out or told what to do. And we had this collective voice, the collective voice that came out of our own discussions, our own strategizing, and not because one of them dictated it, right? And so when we became a constituency, we became more powerful and we were heard. And so this is like a really at a micro level. But since the question was posed within the context of a Pakistani university, think about it. If you're a student, if you're a professor, look around yourself objectively in a way, which is kind of hard, and see what are the things that are wrong. How are minorities being treated on your campus? How are students generally being treated by the clerical staff, by the administration? Are there any things that you think are unjust, right? But people don't speak up against them because they are in a precarious situation. Find those things. Even list them. Then reach out to first the other like-minded people and ask them, what do you think about this? This is how I feel about this policy. And then they will reach out to others, right? And then you develop a constituency, a group that talks about those issues, speaks them, writes about them, takes those issues to administration. Then it's not one person lodging a complaint and waiting for a decision. It's a constituency that is committed to each other, right? Cannot be broken apart, cannot be bought, right? You can't work with a constituency and then take an appointment and say, well, I've now become a director, I can't do that. No, Don't sell out your colleagues, of course. But that was what I meant, that systemic change is necessary. But we cannot wait until there is an ideal moment. There are no ideal moments. We just make those moments. So we work as individuals, and then we build solidarities, and then we challenge the system wherever we can. And we challenge it as a constituency, as a solidarity group, right? And all the while thinking critically of our own actions and our own behaviors and learning how best to do what we do as a group. So that's all. I hope this kind of amplifies what I tried to explain. And those of you who weren't at the talk, I hope this is self contained enough for you to understand what I'm talking about. Thank you so much for your time. Hope you all are doing well. Hope you are staying safe and taking care of each other. Please continue to do so. And I will now see you next time. Until then, as always, peace and love.